LibertyNation.com does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement.
Donald Trump is indicted. The facts and the fallout. All right now on this episode of The Uprising.
We are The Uprising.
For my friends, anything. For my enemies, the law. Those are the words of Peruvian, I think, President and strongman Oscar Benavidez, and they are for Donald Trump now. Welcome back to The Uprising, a podcast of LibertyNation.com. I'm your host, Scott Cosenza, and joining me today is LibertyNation.com senior political analyst, Mr. Timothy Elting-Donner. Tim.
Hello,
welcome
Scott.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
We are recording the morning after the announcement that President Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States, has been indicted for charges that are yet unknown, but everywhere is reporting that they are related to the quote-unquote hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, or confidentiality clause, as I like to refer to it, before hush money became the term de rigueur.
Spoken like the lawyer that you are.
And just at the moment, LibertyNation.com, the sponsor of today's program, exceeds in many areas, but it does not exceed in having sources inside District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office, like, for instance, the New York Times does. And so that's why I'm going to read from that organ, whose veracity is dubious, I think.
Organ, yeah, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard the New York Times referred to as an organ. That's yes. Good, yeah. A vital organ for the left.
Discussing what these charges may be about.
I don't know what's such a big deal, Scott. I mean, they say it's the first time a former president's ever been arrested. That's just not true. Ulysses S. Grant was arrested for his horse and buggy going in excessive speed in 1876. So, I mean, There's precedent here.
It's important. It's important to recall that, for instance, William Jefferson Blythe Clinton was not indicted or prosecuted for raping Juanita Broderick multiple times. He has never had to face justice in that area. So presidents, generally don't have to face justice for their misdeeds, and only for the dogged pursuit of justice, Tim, by these progressive prosecutors, a 4 or 5 year long investigation into a misdemeanor that on a wing and a prayer may be able to be turned into a felony by Alvin Bragg, do we get justice for Mr. Trump? And I think that is why there is a problem with this indictment. This is not justice if a prosecutor pursues to the ends of the earth a kind of tenuous case. I want to play. He didn't speak that I know of since the indictment was announced, but earlier this week on Meet the Press, the president's lawyer, Joe Tacopina, appeared. I want to go ahead and play that segment.
Sounds like you have a defense ready to go, but everything you've described, is probable. I mean, if you're a prosecutor, you're making these claims. Great. Show us your proof of it. It seems like there's enough at dispute here that actually this belongs in a court of law to resolve this.
Of course it doesn't belong in a court of law, Chuck. Listen, again, you can't bring a case, cobble 2 misdemeanors together to try and make a felony to meet the statute of limitations when not one misdemeanor exists. There is no crime here. There's not even a bad act, okay? Again, detractor of Donald Trump or not,
there's a crime here. I mean, the crime is the one that Michael Cohen, there is a campaign finance crime that he has pled guilty to that involves the former president. So there's a crime at the core of this issue.
Wrong.
Well, but that's not what the federal government says.
If you listen
Michael
to
Cohen served time. What did he serve time
you're wrong.
for?
Can I tell you? A million different crimes? I mean, the guy was committing taxi medallion frauds, other perjury. Listen, if you want to just say it, fine. But if you let me answer, which is when Michael Cohen pled guilty, he said something that was so crucial to campaign finance law, and it's what every expert has used. Even if you accept the word of a convicted perjurer, a liar, a guy who's lied in every form he's ever been in, he said when he pled guilty that this was done for the benefit of the campaign and for personal embarrassment to the client and his family, including his young son, Barron. Once he said the end part, it takes it out of campaign finance law. It's personal funds.
Right.
It had to be used exclusively for the campaign. It's like me buying a suit to go on the campaign so I could look better than if I had a old reggae suit on. That's a personal expenditure. It's not a campaign expenditure. Even though it benefits the campaign, it's not a campaign expenditure. So when Michael Cohen said it was both for personal and campaign uses or reasons, that takes it out of exclusively campaign finance law, and there is no crime. I'm telling you, Chuck, that's the law on campaign finance.
We're going to find out. It is a very murky law on campaign finance, but it does, like I said, it sounds like
for sure.
This is why you might need a court of law to figure this out. Mr. Jacopino.
It's funny. I'm kind of flummoxed because Chuck Todd there to me is just such a special case.
He's already what Chuck Todd did there was essentially ascribe or conflate Michael Cohen's guilt into Trump's. Well, we know a crime was committed because Michael Cohen's already pleaded to it. I mean, look, here's the problem. The biggest problem they've got, in addition to how flimsy this is and how obvious it is, they're going to get him on anything that they possibly can, even expanding a misdemeanor into a felony dubiously. Michael Cohen is what I would call a professional liar. That's what he does for a living. He lies for a living to protect probably Trump, certainly himself. He has zero credibility. And on top of this is a process crime that most people won't even understand.
Well,
and it's going to unleash a torrent of stories about other instances where payoffs were made or other moves were made that could be counted as campaign contributions.
I want to stop you there because I want to drill down on that for a second. But I just want to focus on, for a moment, the glee with which Chuck Todd, like when he starts off that thing and he's like, well, look, it sounds like there's a controversy here, so we should work it out in court. And it's like, no,
if in doubt, drag Donald Trump into court. Sure.
Exactly. The idea that, well, we'll just have a criminal trial to sort these things out is preposterous. That a prosecutor must only present charges that they have total confidence they have probable cause for the crime to be committed, and they can prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt in court. That's the standard by which.
Here's the question I have for you, though. Okay, all of this aside, how long will it take take it from here to the end with your best guess of how long this process will run before a jury finally rules on guilty or no guilty on these what's being reported as 34 different counts?
Yeah.
How long? All
right. I'm going to answer that question after I finish saying that the process crime you discuss, I think, is something we need to just unpack for a moment, given what's going on with our U.S. history in the past 24 hours, right? And so I'll return now to the New York Times piece that I was going to quote from before. And they say that Mr. Bragg's prosecutors appear to have zeroed in on the way Mr. Trump and his family business, the Trump Organization, handled the reimbursement to Mr. Cohen. In internal documents, Trump Organization employees falsely recorded the repayments as legal expenses, and the company invented a bogus retainer agreement with Cohen to justify them. Cohen later testified, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, testified before Congress that Trump said the former president knew about the phony legal expenses and the retainer agreement. In New York, it can be a crime to falsify business records, and Mr. Bragg's office is likely to build the case around that charge, according to people with knowledge of the matter and outside legal experts. But to charge falsifying business records as a felony rather than a misdemeanor, Mr. Bragg's prosecutors must show that Trump's intent to defraud, including an effort to commit or conceal a second crime. Right. And that, Tim, is where we have the election law issue. Bragg's prosecutors might argue that the payment to Daniels represents an illicit contribution to Trump's campaign. The money silenced Daniels, aiding his candidacy. And that's why I think the Tacopina clip there has some serious value, because it says what the law currently is, which is that if there was a non-electoral reason for Donald Trump to do this thing, which is to say, pay money to Stormy Daniels so that she doesn't go shouting about the tryst that they had, then that is...
Which Trump has denied, by the way. He's denied even having a tryst.
Yeah, that's...
Well, look, I think there's
so
many
Stormy
different...
Daniels, by the way, I just want to get this one factual point in. Stormy Daniels discussed that tryst. I think it was on the Howard Stern show some years prior to Trump's candidacy in an offhand remark. So it has the ring of credulity to it, I would just say.
Well, the fact that they had a tryst made...
That's what I'm talking about.
Certainly have that, but that's far from a proof of anything. Look, I think the Democrat strategy, which of course revolves around the election of 2024, everything does now. I think this is what they have in mind. If they arrest Trump, it will re-engage Trump supporters and maybe some other Republicans who are outraged at the idea that this is political persecution. It will enhance his chances of winning the nomination. But they know at the same time, they're expecting Trump supporters to, come to his rescue and be outraged and be energized and all of that. But they also know in their minds, at least, in the minds of many, that yes, this will help to secure the nomination. But they also know that the people they have to convince in a general election are those stubbornly fickle, independent voters and suburban women and the kind of people that turned against Trump in 2020. Those people, I don't see them looking at the indictment of Trump as giving them reason to vote for him. I see that in a primary. I don't in an election. And I think that the Democrats have decided, you look at all of Joe Biden's numbers. I wrote a piece this week called The Grim Outlook for Joe Biden. I mean, he's underwater on everything. A majority of his own party doesn't want him to run. A majority of people question his fitness for office and whether he's too old to be president. I think they realize that if they run against a young, energetic guy like Ron DeSantis, they'll probably lose. But if they run against Trump, they can bring back all the old narratives and scare people off of Trump, and Biden
I want to
can
go ahead and talk
survive
about
for a second term.
DeSantis in just a minute. But before we just close out that peeling of the onion, I want to return for the final paragraph, Tim, the nuts paragraph, as far as I'm concerned, from the New York Times. Yet a conviction is not a sure thing, and Mr. Bragg's case might apply a legal theory that has yet to be evaluated by judges. A New York Times review of relevant cases and interviews with election law experts strongly suggests that New York State prosecutors have never before filed an election case involving a federal campaign. So even their organ, as you like me saying before, the organ of the progressive left, all the news that's fit to print, Tim, thought it was incumbent on their main story about this indictment to mention this is a brand new way to enforce a law against somebody. And the idea that you can in one instance say, and I don't have a sizzle reel here, maybe I should have brought it to the table, but of all these politicians saying, it's the facts and the law, following the facts and the law, it's just justice and facts and the law, is rank bullshit. Excuse my French, but that's what it is. It has no bearing whatsoever in anything. And I want to even caution you about this talk about how we think about these things of like they are doing this. This is one man's effort, Alvin Bragg. He's the one who has a little kingdom in his office, and he gets to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, but you don't think that Alvin Bragg has had incredible pressure placed on him from other, from more prominent Democrats.
Tim, I would love to see what his text chains look like in the past week or so. It would be very fascinating to see what level.
But you can't say that
what they're saying.
He didn't do this on his own island. He doesn't live in isolation away from the rest of the world. He knew perfectly well what this would do politically. And you can be certain that he has gotten ample advice from the Justice Department, the Biden campaign, the whole thing. I'm sure that he has checked in on all of his
All right. Well,
sources
that is your
and thinks, look,
speculation,
here's how you,
and I appreciate it, but I want to make sure that it is speculation. It would be interesting to really get the receipts.
of course,
on that
it's
and find out.
speculation, but
Yeah.
at this point, it's speculation about what these supposedly 34 different charges are.
Well,
I think the word to apply to Bragg's approach to this indictment is novel. It's a novel idea.
you're right.
To turn
Yeah.
this thing into a felony. And I think if you look at that way, like
He
you
is
look
a
like
maverick prosecutor with a novel theory of criminality
Right.
applied to his. It just so happens, Tim. Isn't it funny when like the worst people in the world just happens to be the one that you dislike for personal reasons or other reasons?
Yes.
Like, so what a quinky dink. Donald Trump, by the way, and we can talk a little bit about this about DeSantis. He has Trump abides, Tim. He has used this 100% to advance his campaign, both nationally,
as we knew he would.
both in the general, I think, and in the primary. He took the opportunity. I think it was the day of his indictment. Was it yesterday? To dump on DeSantis. And one of the things I thought that was great about the Donald, and boy, when he says it, he speaks right to my heart, Tim, as this anti-war candidate. So he attacks DeSantis and is hoisting
As
himself
a warmonger and
on the peace flag,
neoconservative and establishment.
for his campaign. Let's listen to the 45th president.
Calling Russia a gas station with a bunch of nuclear weapons, or calling Putin, quote, authoritarian gas station attendant with some legacy of nuclear weapons from the old Soviet Union, is exactly the kind of simple-minded thinking that has produced decades of failed diplomacy and ultimately war. And where is that war going? Those such as Mitt Romney and Ron DeSantis, very much alike, who insist on arrogantly treating Russia as deeply inferior to the other nations of the world, with no history or culture or pride, are not only ignorant and foolish, but their attitude makes it impossible to negotiate peace. Absolutely impossible. Under my administration, we were tough on Russia, tougher than any administration before, but we also demonstrated respect for Russia and the Russian people. We demonstrated understanding for Russian history and the fact that Russia lost over 20 million lives in World War II. They were fighting with us. This kind of neocon rhetoric mocking Russia's nuclear weapons, along with implying that Putin must be tried and presumably executed as a war criminal, only increases the chance of deadly nuclear escalation. Fundamentally, it shows a lack of depth, a lack of seriousness, and a lack of sophistication on the subtleties and complexities of foreign policy. You can't do certain things and end up with peace. This is not the time for an on-the-job training as we face the possibility of nuclear war. And our leaders, if you call them that, got us there. This is where we are. The word nuclear was never even mentioned during the Trump administration. Now it's being mentioned every hour of every day. We need a statesman and a peacemaker in the White House, not someone who recites mindless and recycled talking points to win the approval of the failed foreign policy establishment that didn't know what they were doing. In 2024, I am the only candidate who can prevent World War III. I will prevent World War III. There's nobody else that's going to do that. Thank you very much.
So it's obvious who he's talking about. I mean, this is a new strategy, right? So instead of, calling Ron DeSantis Ron DeSanctus or Ron DeSanctimonious, and trying to stick insulting nicknames.
And he's on the
him.
keto, they say, Tim, so he can't call him fat or whatever, especially looking in the mirror. There's a bit of a pot and kettle there for Trump. So he's got.
Oh, but here's the thing:
that's taken away too.
He's gone from personal attacks on DeSantis to policy-based attacks, and trying to position Ron DeSantis I mean, it's a nice trying to put DeSantis in the same bed with Mitt Romney. I don't think anybody's going to buy that because the similarities between the two are hardly striking. In fact, there are almost none because DeSantis has proven that he will take on the hardest fights, like against Disney, which now could be backfiring on him. But the point is, because of the Disney board striking back, but the point is that he's gone from a personality-based attack to a basically he'll get us into World War III. And I see, here's the thing that I find not perplexing because he'll do anything for advantage, as most politicians will, but that basically DeSantis said the same thing as Trump. We should stay out of Ukraine. This is a regional conflict, and we don't need to be integrally involved in it. How does that differ from Donald Trump's position? It doesn't, what he's saying doesn't ring true because DeSantis basically agrees with him on the central foreign policy issue of Russian engagement in Ukraine.
Yeah, I appreciate your analysis there. I didn't care about that, not in a way that, like, I don't care about that. I didn't care about it because to me the takeaway there, the interesting takeaway was that's how they think that selling peace is valuable, and I love that's where the market is. At least that's their.
Well, I agree. It's a good thing to
you know?
address because I think Biden is vulnerable on this. I'm not sure that DeSantis is, but Trump. You have to see what kind of a line he draws in terms of what he's willing to do to stop DeSantis. He's proven he's willing to do almost anything. He's implied that he has groomed teenage girls, even implied that he had interest in men. Okay, he's throwing the kitchen sink, but now he's pivoted.
It's so ridiculous.
He's pivoted to saying, I'm the only one that can keep you out of war. And he has some credibility with that because of his record in office. And I think he stoked fear in the hearts of foreign leaders because they didn't know what he'd do, but they knew he was willing to do almost anything to stop any kind of threat to the country. So let's see where it goes from here. This indictment, of course, changes everything because now all the talk's going to be about the indictment and not about these.
Well, let me stop you right there and return to your question, which was how long does this take to get to a jury? And the answer is I have absolutely no idea, Tim.
But could it be, okay, let's go to best case scenario that the thing is wrapped up as quickly as possible, both the jury selection and the discovery and all of that is wrapped up in as fast a time as you could possibly expect.
Here's why I can't tell you the answer to your question, and it's going to be ultimately unsatisfying for you. I can tell right now.
Well,
you're not going to get.
Okay.
You're not going to get.
Look, if there's no answer, there's no answer.
Well,
I don't want to.
Even before the COVID court delays, I wouldn't have had a good answer for you. But because I imagine they're still fighting through a backlog of years-long delays, you got to remember. New York, more than probably almost anywhere else, they probably still have mask mandates in place now. Like they're still, in other words, they're so far behind the rest of us in opening things back up.
Well, the thing I understand now. The reason I asked that question is because there's three possible scenarios as we head to election 2024. This is all assuming Trump wins the nomination, which is not a sure bet, but let's assume that he does. You have three different scenarios. The first is that he remains under indictment right through the election.
I love this conversation. Yes. Okay.
The second one is that he's convicted before the election of one or more charges.
Right.
And the third is that he is found not guilty. Right. And all of them portend very different outcomes for the election.
Fourth, Tim, is kind of it sort of fits into box number one, but I think it should have its own separate boxes. That is exactly when the trial is scheduled for, like during the election, But
that's a real roll of the dice because admittedly it's New York courts, which tend to be probably more liberal than federal courts in general. But that's a roll of the dice, because if the jury finds him not guilty on these charges, finds him not guilty on all accounts, then the Democrats have a serious problem on their hands.
So
Because
even picking a jury. So now I'm not suggesting that, especially because of the way the process has been played out, that Donald Trump will get a fair hearing from the organs of justice, as it were, in the Empire State. But if he were to, how our constitutional system is set up is that any potential juror could be stricken from the case if they basically has said anything disparaging about Donald Trump, that the Trump defense team could say they're not able to keep a fair mind. So all the never Trumpers who,
but also there could be people that are pro-Trump that they detect as being sympathetic to Trump, who could get on the jury, and they'll be kicked out by the prosecution, right?
Yes. That is certainly something that you would think the prosecution would do, and they would be within their rights to do it. However, in terms of the way it's supposed to work, the protection is for the accused to get a fair trial. We're not necessarily set up and have all these protections for the state to, quote unquote, get a fair trial, because the state just does whatever it wants. They can't be prosecuted effectively. It's about protecting the citizen and the rights.
Although they can be snagged for malicious prosecution, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
good luck with that. That's, boy.
Well, I'm just stating the law, not whether there's any chance of it actually being applied in this case.
And so I would expect that, I mean, if you just think about that process of examining all these potential jurors' social media postings and so forth, and I mean, boy, it's a daunting task when you consider how widely popular Donald Trump is, and how widely popular kind of hating and defending him has been for anybody who's on Twitter or Facebook or involved in politics in the last, 7 years in this country, basically. So I think it's just wrapping your arms around it. Now, I was going to tell you this. One of my first legal jobs was
it didn't seem to ruin the legacy of Ulysses S. Grant that he was issued a ticket for going too fast with his horse and buggy.
I just haven't studied
sorry
that
to
case,
keep coming back to that and trying to insert a little bit of light in this grim discussion.
One of the first legal jobs I had while I was in law school, I was a volunteer for the public defender's office, and one of the jobs I had was you would comb through all the electronic court records and see if defendants were entitled to be released because of a speedy trial objection. So basically, you just look at the date that they were incarcerated, and you fast forward X number of days. Okay, this is the date at which they have a constitutional right to be tried by. Now, here's the thing. Many times during a trial, the defense will ask for some delay in the process for one of the many things or reasons, that including just like, hey, they're going to Aruba for a week because they're getting married, or they want more time to develop their case or interview witnesses or whatever. And so in getting back to that discussion about how long it takes to get to trial, if the defendant has their foot firmly planted on the accelerator, things get to trial a lot faster than if they either lift off the accelerator or touch the brakes. And so in some capacity, Donald Trump and his defense team have some capacity to manage the timing of this. It's not exclusively the ball's in their court, but part of it is. And of
course, that's a roll of the dice if they want to expedite it. It's a roll of the dice for them, because if he's convicted, you don't want that happening before the election.
I think that the defense, I think it's fair to say that the defense can do more to delay than they can to expedite, probably. And so if they do everything they can to delay it, then they can probably stretch it out for quite some time. I think that Donald Trump, in terms of how he's processing this, again, this is I'm projecting, I guess, onto Trump what I think his values are. But boy, we're talking about Donald Trump now. Everybody's talking about Donald Trump now. And the best thing for Donald Trump is for people to talk about Donald Trump. So
And that's all. The point
So he
is
may-
now that's all they're talking about.
so he
right?
may want to. He may want to pump the brakes on this. He may want to slam on the brakes and keep it going. It's good for fundraising, I'm sure, in a way.
Probably the smart thing for him, given the choice, is the safe choice is to try and make it so that he's still under indictment during the election campaign, but
As
that
an
the trial
initial-
hasn't been completed yet.
As an initial thought, I mean, I tend to agree with you. I don't think I've really kind of tried to think about all the different, 3D chess about how this works out, but that
Right.
seems to make sense to me, Tim.
Right.
The other thing too about how we discussed how the New York Times discusses this is a novel, maverick attempt to prosecute somebody on these facts. All of Trump's opponents on the Republican side kind of have to come out and support him because they are outrageous
Yes,
charges.
exactly.
That's the other
and
thing.
they
too.
have,
I
and they
know.
have. Mike Pence came out, Glenn Youngkin came out, Ron DeSantis notably came out, all of them. And DeSantis, by the way, has said he will not cooperate in any extradition of Trump, though Trump has said he's going to surrender voluntarily, likely on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday.
That is the smart money bet. Mr. Alvin Bragg's abuse of this process should be challenged in court, and Trump is right to not try to, stoke some fire.
So then you're saying you agree with
defiance.
Chuck Todd. You're saying you agree with
No,
Chuck
no,
Todd
no,
because
no,
he's
no,
saying
no.
it should be settled in court.
No. What I'm suggesting is that Donald Trump shouldn't try to create some last stand at Mar-a-Lago, resisting efforts by New York police to arrest him. Is all I'm saying.
Right.
That's what I'm referring to when I say it should be.
And it
settled
may
in
be an
court.
easy thing for DeSantis to say he won't cooperate in an extradition because he knows there isn't going to be an extradition. Right. So he doesn't
Maybe.
want to, all these other candidates, including Nikki Haley, by the way, all of them, the other Republican candidates or presumed candidates like DeSantis and perhaps Glenn Youngkin, who is still on the national circuit, still a threat to enter the race. They're all forced to express their outrage about this, so that Trump has positioned it so he's getting all the publicity, and he believes there's no such thing as bad publicity, and he's getting all of the people he has to defeat for the nomination to back up his outrage at this happening. So there's no question, I think, that he increases his chances to win the nomination with this. But at the same time, Scott, I think he diminishes his chances of winning the general election because, again, I'll just repeat it for emphasis, the people that he needs to persuade in order to win another term are people I don't believe are going to be persuaded by even an unjust arrest. And I'm talking about independent voters, most especially suburban women, who completely abandoned him in 2020. I see, so we say a centrist Republican being outraged and supporting Trump, but I don't see independent voters seeing
when the price of,
an indictment as a badge of honor.
When the price of eggs and gas and everything else is even more in a year than it is today, we'll see if those
And it
suburban
will
ladies,
be, yeah.
And also for Trump, hey, get past that's a bridge. We'll jump over that bridge when we come to it. Like, let's get the primary wins in, right? And then worry about the general. And I think in the primary, this all has to play very well. I mean, even if you are, if you're a never Trumper, then you're still a never Trumper, of course. Don't worry. Fine. Okay. But if you're not a never Trumper and you just think that DeSantis is maybe a better politician, younger, could have 2 terms. If you put him in, there's all kinds of reasons why not hating Donald Trump, you might support Ron DeSantis. And I think that this sucks energy from the DeSantis campaign in that regard, because it's such an outrage. Mr. Bragg's indictment of Donald Trump on these facts is so, it's so, I mean, how can you say it in a way that it
it's
conveys
so blatant, it's so obvious.
Without just saying it's so blatantly political, it is just raw politics.
It's 100% political. That's it. That's the point. It's 100% political because the kind of thing he did has been done hundreds of times in the past. But remember, DeSantis is going to have his visibility is certainly going to diminish in the days and weeks ahead. But he has the luxury of being able to choose the time to announce that he's running. He's not going to do it right now, but he can wait. I think the plan was generally to have him announce in probably late April or May after the Florida legislative session is over. We're one day away from April Fool's Day, so it's not going to be long. But he can wait into the summer, DeSantis, if he wants, wait until the winds are more favorable to people hearing his message.
I now think that this is a good thing for Donald Trump's candidacy. What are you prepared to?
For his primary candidacy, yes. For his general election candidacy, clearly no.
Well, to the extent that you have to win the primary to get into the general, would you say that it's good in that regard?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I've been saying, a couple times in a couple of different ways, is that, this will help him secure the nomination. But I still think of the viable candidates, he's still least likely to defeat Joe Biden.
All right. Well, let's put a pin in the. Have you said everything you wanted to say on the Trump indictment?
I think
today?
so, and I'm sure we'll have fun with it again.
Do you think there'll be future opportunities to report on this story, Tim?
No, probably not. People have just ignored the first president, to be under indictment. I think people just ignore it. It's not much of a story, right?
When you think of the things that presidents have done or other high officials I could talk about Hillary's
how about
futures trading endeavors if we want to talk about.
How about Lyndon Baines Johnson saying of course we didn't find out till years later, but he said in a conversation that was recorded in 1965, he said, "I can't win the Vietnam War. Can't win it, but I can't leave. But I can't leave for political purposes."
Right.
The point is, the effect is that tens of thousands of Americans were killed because of his political cowardice. Okay, that to me is a crime. It may not. There's no specific crime
for the progressives
that he can be charged with. But
they were 10,000 boys from the least of the society, right? The poor, the unwanted, convicted of joyriding and sent off to war or whatever. People who couldn't have a college deferment or connections to get out of that war. That's who LBJ condemned to death in the jungles of South.
That's exactly right. And I'm saying let's get some perspective here, and we'll see stories in the coming days about real crimes that were committed by presidents.
Also, a lot of those guys are still alive and still suffering from what LBJ and other American presidents put them through in that war. That's one of the reasons that animates me against the wars.
Well, I think you're right in saying that Donald Trump, because he's already done it for 4 years, is most likely to keep us out of World War III. And if he has a relationship with Putin, which the left has always found to be very dark and secretive, then the good thing is
Putin was his handler.
He can use that influence
from back in the 80s, isn't
well,
that?
he can use that. Trump can use his influence on. What do you say?
I thought Putin was his KGB handler from way back in the 80s. Did I get that? Did I get that wrong?
Well, of course, we know that the Mueller report was just a whitewash. That there really was Russian collusion, but they just couldn't snag him on it. That's but he can also. Trump is in a position where I think he has a relationship with Putin that will have more impact on Putin's decision making than anything Joe Biden does. That is, if Putin lives to see the next presidency, because, by all accounts, he's very, very sick. He travels incredible reports that he travels with an oncologist, which is a cancer doctor. So I think he's in very rough physical shape, and what impact that has on his conduct of the war is something we can only speculate on. But I think
let's turn our attention to a couple other stories that we don't need to speculate on.
What? There's other stories.
There were, Tim. I had a whole show prep before this.
And then Alvin Bragg had to go ruin your entire lineup.
Hey, you know what, Tim? It's not him. It's the law and the facts. He just applied the facts to the law. Then Trump gets indicted. That's how this works. Now, all right, we'll move past that.
Yes, Counselor.
And let's talk for a moment about the United States House of Representatives Judiciary Committee subcommittee on the weaponization of government hearing yesterday.
This was one of the committees that was demanded by the most conservative members of the Republican caucus in order to vote for McCarthy.
I thought that it was extracted as a promise for the vote, and I actually checked with LibertyNation.com's Jim Fight on that point, who's written about it previously, and he said that actually it wasn't. It was definitely something that they were interested in having, but it wasn't one of the extracted promises. Because
he may have already been.
Yes,
McCarthy may have already been planning to do it, but the caucus, the Freedom Caucus members who sort of led the charge to hold McCarthy accountable and make him promise stuff.
Yeah.
I think that they, that they feel that that McCarthy. Well, whatever. Go ahead. Say what you're going to say.
Yeah.
I was going to go down another bunny trail.
The important point, I think, is, and this is from Ms. Hageman has replaced Ms. Cheney as the representative from Wyoming, and she asked this guy, John Sauer, who was testifying, what his sort of principal takeaways were for the American people, to speak directly to the American people about this. And just a bit on Mr. Sauer, he's a former Scalia clerk, and he is on both sides of both plaintiffs. Missouri and Louisiana have sued the Biden administration for violating the First Amendment rights of the people of Missouri and Louisiana, respectively, for their censorship campaign against social media. And that's what this is about.
I would emphasize maybe 2 or 3 points. First, federal censorship activities are not in retreat. They are expanding. Federal executive officials are expanding the topics on which they seek censorship. It's expanding to more and more agencies, and it's expanding to any social media platform they can reach to. So we are not in a situation where this is something that occurred in the past. We have overwhelming evidence that it's growing and growing and growing, and there's little indication that there will ever be any voluntary relinquishment of the power to dictate what ordinary Americans can say on social media. So it's a problem that is growing. It's a looming threat. A second point that I would make is that censorship, as I said in my opening statement, both now and every other time when there's been censorship throughout human history, is not about truth. It is about political power. It's about obtaining power. It's about preserving power. And it's about expanding power. And the evidence of this, again, is overwhelming. You see it right there in the documents, some of which were just quoted. You see the White House saying, what we really want you to take down, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, is borderline content. Borderline content that's described in the emails is often true. It's often true. It involves core political speech. We want you to take that down because that is what is most effectively undermining the narratives that we want to be out there on social media. That's an egregious violation of the First Amendment. It is viewpoint discrimination. I would also point out that many of the comments that have been made on the other side today have said we can't let there be misinformation on social media because a tiny minority of the 100 million people who might see it might take it and do something bad. You might call that the minority report approach to the First Amendment. It's absolute poppycock. It turns the First Amendment absolutely on its head. The promise of the First Amendment is that no official, high or petty, will be able to dictate what Americans do. Americans can make their own opinions. They are adults.
I think it's fair to point out too, Scott, that, when the founders authored the framers authored the First Amendment, that they gave special emphasis to political speech. That's the speech that demands the highest level of protection. In the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights, there's no question that political speech is that which should most, that one has to make the most effort to be able to abridge.
That's the reason for the
because it's
amendment.
viewpoint discrimination, right?
Absolutely. It does protect, although we wish that I wish the Supreme Court would do a little better job in announcing more protections for commercial speech, for example. But yes, if there's one speech that we can say that the First Amendment was designed to protect, implemented to protect, and is all about protecting, it is political speech. And the idea that the government can go to Twitter or any of these other places and say, oh, we don't really like how you're discussing this. You know, there was a Stanford law, I don't know if his title's professor, but he's Stanford Law School's constitutional law sort of project. Mr. Seligman, I believe is his name, was a witness before the committee. And he basically said, listen, there's no, you don't have an or else statement here. And that's where this fails as some kind of First Amendment violation, because these departments never said, you better do this or else. And the idea that the law requires an or else is a new thing. You know, just the intimidation itself. I mean, if they pick up the phone and say, hey, did you say this? We don't like this. Well, I mean, does there have to be an or else to know that is, especially if you want to curry favor with the administration? I think it's... well,
there has to be, the question, I guess, revolves around what the legal remedy is for abridging someone's free speech rights, First Amendment rights. And that isn't clear, right? I mean, because this is the sort of foundation of the constitutional republic, but that has to be placed into law with specific penalties for the abridgment of free speech, right? So,
well, the penalties will be decided by a jury and a judge if the case ever gets to that point. It is right. So right now there's this case, and it's, I actually can't remember if it's Missouri v. Biden or Biden v. Missouri is the correct way to refer to it, but it's one of those two. And it is the case that Mr. Sauer has helmed for those states, and that's right now being hashed out with sort of pretrial discovery issues, and they can go on for quite a while. It's part of the reason why, with your question about how long it might take to get from Trump to a jury, is because of that process and how long it takes. And so what they're wrangling about right now, Tim, is whether they can get Jen Psaki and some of the other senior administration officials in for depositions. The judge has ordered, and his name escapes me, but he's a Trump appointee to the district court, and he's ordered a rapid discovery process for this case, which is a huge boost to Mr. Sauer and those who are suing the administration, because the best thing for the administration to do is just delay until, maybe there's another administration or who knows what could happen, right? Rather than get everything out on the table right away. So we'll obviously be following the
slow
case.
Drip.
Yeah. But the other thing about Sauer's testimony is, and this is what I thought was really scary about it, is he says that it's proceeding apace, this censorship. It's not like, we did it during the COVID with the, lab leak theory.
Why should they stop? Because they're not being held to. They're not being held to account by the, legacy media. They're going to just look away because again, in the era of Donald Trump, they have sold the idea that it's an exceptional era where normal political behavior is paused because of the threats to the country posed by what Joe Biden called the semi-fascist MAGA movement, right? So they justify it in their minds because it's an exceptional threat to democracy. God forbid.
I think that we're going to see now more of this criminal indictment of political leaders. Why would we see less of it? I don't know.
Well, it's happened in a lot of other parts of the world. There's a sense that this never happens in a democracy. And that's not true. There have been at least 75 former leaders, presidents, prime ministers, whatever, of democratic countries, small d, fairly broadly defined, who have been arrested for one reason or another after they left office. Now, that it's the first time it's happened here, but it's not unprecedented across the world.
Well, it is the hallmark, I think, of unstable, perhaps they're democracies, but they're, do you want to go live or open a business where every few years they arrest the guy who was just in office, and then his gang, a new gang comes in, and then they arrest that gang later on?
Right. And they can be sure
and on
that
these facts and on these charges, again, circling back around to the most supportive of jihad against Donald Trump, these legacy papers saying this is a novel application and theory of crimes to get Donald Trump. And that alone should give pause to everybody and suggest that this is, in fact, a political witch hunt. It's not about the administration of justice, which is how it's being sold. It's just about getting Donald Trump. That perverts incentives all down the line.
The narrative writes itself, right? I mean, it just does because of the flimsy nature of the charges. I mean, if it had something to do with the Mar-a-Lago raid, it had something to do with supposedly, allegedly interfering with the accounting of votes in Georgia. If there was something spectacular like that, I think people could understand. But this is, I mean, if you have to take 2 or 3 paragraphs to explain why someone is guilty of something to the average person, I mean, I think you've lost a lot already. I mean, if someone commits a murder, this person killed that person, murdered that person. Very simple. Or this person stole money from a corporation. Or if it was illegal, this person paid hush money. But when you have to go beyond that and explain, but then it was characterized as a personal expense when in fact it was a campaign contribution. If you have to go that far to explain it, I think you've lost the public, and I think people, in the end, default to what they believed about Trump all along. The big difference now, though, is he has a record to compare to a Biden record. I mean, when Biden ran, he could just take unlimited shots at Trump because he had no responsibility and no power. Now he has to be held accountable. And so Trump should be trying to compare his record and the economic prosperity, keeping us out of war, all of that stuff. Putin was kept contained during that time. He needs to really just compare his record directly head-to-head to Biden's. That will give him, in my mind, the best chance to win. But I don't know whether, the Soviet-style show trial on the January 6th committee, I don't know how many people, when they saw that, said, I could just never see voting for this guy again. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. And boy, the year and a half run up to November of 2024, Scott, is going to be like none we've ever seen.
We're about fresh out of time for the show, but I will mention that Mr. Jacob Chesney, the QAnon shaman, was reported released from federal prison this week to a halfway house or some lesser incarcerative facility, and there's a suggestion that it was the video of him asking people to not be violent and to leave the Capitol grounds, which his attorney says that they were denied access to, that prompted this. So I expect.
Well, wasn't he? The thing is, it'd be nice to think that that the prosecution was called out and they admitted their mistake and released him. But I believe that Mr. Chansley was already scheduled to be released or transferred.
Not according to the statement I read in the Daily Mail that was supplied by his lawyer, but that's the data point I have on it. That federal inmates who are quote unquote good inmates, right, that have good behavior while inside, are often released up to a year or so before their scheduled sentencing conclusion. But as I understand it, Mr. Chansley may have been released somewhat significantly earlier than that. I think it was 14 months he still had, which might have been a little early. So, but in any case, the QAnon.
Well, they don't want. I think the left doesn't want to continue to let him serve as a martyr.
Well, I think it's a smart move for them politically, right?
Yeah.
Get it off the table, and then he can appeal his conviction in the courts with called Brady issue, which is when the prosecution doesn't turn over exculpatory material like they're required to do by.
Right, not to be confused with the Brady gun laws, by the way.
Yeah, and the other story that I, we're going to have to talk about this, I think, next week, is the shocking revelation that, again, talk about administration malfeasance, Tim, that the administration sent IRS agents to Matt Taibbi's home the day he testified before Congress in a way that they don't do to anybody else, seemingly ever. And one generation away, LibertyNation.com's parent corporation was discriminated against by the IRS and targeted, and then actually paid out a money settlement to us as part of a class action lawsuit. So we know what it's like to be targeted illegally by this organization. And it was, Biden probably learned it from Lois Lerner and Obama.
But wait a minute now. You are saying that this was illegal. Is it actually illegal for IRS agents to come to your front door and ask you questions?
It's illegal for political officers to direct IRS agents to apply the law against people because of their political views.
But can they prove that that's what happened here?
No, then we would have no.
Right.
It's just who are you going to believe, me or your own lying eyes? That's what they're saying about it, basically, right? The idea that is a coinky-dink, that there is some. To me, it does not pass the laugh test, but you're free to make up your own mind if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, knowing what you know. That's up to you, sir.
No, I'm just saying that this is more about a matter of if they think they can get away with it for lack of proof, right? Yeah. Then whether it's a legitimate or illegitimate charge, right? So I think, everything now is in the context of politics in 2024 and keeping Democrats in the White House, especially since, by the way, Scott, the prospects for holding the Senate or taking the House look pretty slim, very slim.
What are you saying? You're saying that the way that the things are moving, it looks like what?
Well, I could easily see, for example, Joe Biden getting reelected, but Republicans taking the Senate and holding the House, because the landscape for Republicans in the Senate in 2024 is spectacularly positive, because the Democrats have like 23 out of the 33 seats they're defending. The Democrats, the Republicans are just defending 10, and none of them are considered really even competitive. So for the Democrats, they're looking at, if they don't hold the White House, Republicans control the big three, the holy trinity of the House, the Senate, and the White House.
Now, I'm not saying he got the idea from us and stole it from us, Tim, but Donald Trump now is reporting on the betting lines on his Truth Social account. I noticed he mentioned that he's doing much more favorably now in the odds for against DeSantis. So
he's broken so many precedents that you lost track after about 2 days in the White House.
I hope gambling's not a crime in Florida. We may see Governor DeSantis reverse his stance on Trump's criminality. All right. Well, we will leave it there for this week. Much more to come. Thanks for joining us on this Uprising.
Thank you, Scott.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We are the Uprising.
Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe space.
You only did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.
That's it for this edition of The Uprising. Remember to hit Liberty Nation News for original articles, LN Radio, and our signature television program, The Conservative 5. Just go to libertynation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Scott Cosenza. Thanks for joining The Uprising. This program is a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.